A prominent theme that plays out in many TV shows, particularly The Wire, Game of Thrones, or The Sopranos, is a process in which people seek, gain, and wield power. Human beings, especially men, tend to organize themselves in a hierarchical manner, consciously or subconsciously. No matter where you go, there's a pecking order, and it's usually determined by social dominance. Throughout The Wire, we see dominance hierarchies play out in the consequences of what happens when men are in positions they did not earn, don't have the ability to handle, and do not have the respect of those they're expected to lead. Whether it's in the drug game, the political sphere, or the education system, the juking of stats so that majors become colonels and mayors become governors has disastrous consequences for any organization as a whole. Dominance hierarchies play a crucial role in determining why some leaders are well respected and others are not. As with any sort of personality analysis, where someone falls in a hierarchy isn't necessarily good or bad or make them good or bad as a person. It's just a way of looking at a behavioral pattern to determine why some people may be successful in certain situations, whereas another person may not. When we look at shows like The Wire or The Sopranos, we can look at how characters in these shows operate within their own hierarchy and analyze why some characters seem to be better suited to lead than others, even though they may have similar technical skills and experience. We can then take that information and compare it to an office-type environment or other places that rely on hierarchies to operate effectively. I will be focusing specifically on male dominance hierarchies, as female dominance hierarchies operate differently. When I refer to a dominance hierarchy, I am referring to where a man falls in the pecking order alongside other men, regardless of any sort of artificial status, meaning that just because a person is in a position of power, it doesn't necessarily qualify them as an alpha. It is important to understand how this dynamic works because it gives a better understanding of why some people react the way they do, predict how they will react, and what happens when they're put in a position they may not have the social dominance to be successful in. There are two prominent male dominance hierarchies. The first is a simple alpha-beta model, which suggests that there are alphas who are successful with dating and sexual relationships with women, and betas who are unsuccessful. The other model is a bit more in-depth and considers more than just the success or failure of one's sexual pursuits. This model includes the alpha, bravo, delta, gamma, and omega. So let's start with the alpha male. When people think of an alpha male, they often think of the powerful CEO or the stereotypical captain of the football team who's dating the hottest cheerleader. Often loud, some alphas like to peacock or show off their machismo, such as Floyd Mayweather, while others are calculating and ruthless, such as Michael Jordan. Whatever the case may be, an alpha is driven by their own self-gratification and their overall status within a group. Oftentimes, alpha behavior is bewildering to people around them, especially lower status men, as they see women swoon over what would normally be considered ridiculous behavior. It's not uncommon to hear a lower status guy whisper to his friend while watching an alpha show off for a girl who appears to be loving it, "Girls actually fall for that stuff?" But when they try the same thing, they fail miserably. And I may or may not be speaking from experience. Alphas tend to be successful as leaders because people want to follow them. They have a charisma that can inspire, but also an aloofness because they don't panic or get flustered easily when things go bad. They can also be extremely intense and driven to succeed, and since their primary goal is to basically just win at all costs, they tend to never back down. As with any group, there isn't just one type of alpha, but those are just some general characteristics. The key thing to remember about an alpha, though, is that people openly want to follow them. As a leader, alphas can fail, though, because they're typically more interested in their own image than with the group's overall well-being. This can cause them to surround themselves with people that aren't competent or capable. They also seek out conflict and often create issues of conflict when a more tactful solution would be better. Alphas sometimes only surround themselves with sycophants and will cut off anyone who isn't wishing to stroke their ego. Finally, alphas often have an X factor, that trait you just can't define. They just have it, and that it is what makes people want to follow them. It's what drives people crazy trying to understand why some people are successful and others aren't. Some great examples of alpha males in fictional entertainment are Tony Soprano and Avon Barksdale. In the real world, we have Michael Jordan and Floyd Mayweather. Next is the Bravo. The Bravo is a socially dominant man, however not as much as the Alpha. They tend to be doers and are great at developing a vision within a broader vision. In short, they're great operations people, such as a VP of a company. While Bravos can be great leaders, they tend to do better leading small teams rather than an entire organization. Bravos have great interpersonal skills and can often act as a mediator between an alpha and others. As leaders, Bravos are successful when they are able to build their own vision that is part of a much larger vision. Bravos want to help their teams and their alpha become successful before their own personal success. A great quote that sums up a Bravo is from Silvio Dante from The Sopranos. "Some people are better at being number twos." As he later states, he prefers the behind the scenes, the advice, and the strategy, and that's where the Bravo is excellent at. The mistake occurs when a Bravo thinks that because they are successful within their smaller capacity, that they can then step into the Alpha's shoes and be just as successful. Unfortunately, that's not typically the case. Oftentimes, a Bravo may have achieved great results in their own position, so then they are promoted to the top tier position where they are the ones required to lay out the overall vision, and this is where they fail. In situations like this, they are often lost or flustered and unsure of themselves. Because they typically play the mediator role, they aren't used to asserting their dominance required for the top tier position. Great examples of Bravos are Silvio Dante in The Sopranos, Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones, and Meyer Lansky in Boardwalk Empire. Deltas are your everyman, your nice guy, and this is what most guys are. The backbone and workhorse of any organization, these are arguably the most important piece of the puzzle. For some Deltas, they're the guys that just want to do their job well, get paid, and go home. Other Deltas desperately want to be more successful in their careers or with women, and they overreach. In the rare instance that they land a higher status role or an extremely attractive woman, they spend most of their time worrying about losing what they have, which they often do. Deltas tend to romanticize relationships and often find themselves at odds with higher status men wondering, what does he have that I don't? Deltas aren't typically upfront, and if they are, they spend the night before rehearsing in their head every scenario of what might happen. Typically, Deltas should be allowed to do their job as they have a strong work ethic and are generally reliable. They don't seek conflict and don't do well with it when they find it. In leadership roles, Deltas often struggle because they don't have the social dominance to eliminate conflict because they can't assert their own authority. The only way they can assert dominance is by threatening to bring in someone in a higher position to enforce the rules. Often, if they are in a position of power, they don't carry the respect of others on the team and will often be undermined by them. Think of Gigi Chestone from The Sopranos. Deltas in the entertainment role will be Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones, Agron from Spartacus, and Jake Hoyt, Ethan Hawke's character in Training Day, who is also a classic Delta. Moving to the lower tier now, we have reached the Gamma. Gammas are interesting because I like to refer to them as wannabe alphas. These are the guys who quietly and bitterly despise everyone around them for not seeing them for how great they are. Gammas are the ones who make it a point to hold grudges against anyone who even looked at them in a way they didn't like. Their mood tends to change based on if they got their way or not, and it can change on a dime. They're the guys who take any sort of critical feedback as a personal attack. They're the ones who get upset if they send you a message and you don't reply immediately, as they believe you aren't being respectful of them. Gammas in charge of anything are a great way to destroy any company, organization, or group. Ironically, Gammas are sometimes openly invited to participate in group activities because they are able to come off as positive and likable, which is why I referred to them as wannabe alphas. Gammas like to think they're well-liked and fun to be around. They think being in charge is the same as leading. However, things start to fall apart once people in the group realize that they invited a nightmare into their circle. They might be the guy who thinks every girl should see them for quote-unquote who they really are, and they're the ones who are always interjecting themselves into conversations and trying to impress everyone with their facts and figures no one asks for. Gammas in general are socially inept and completely self-unaware. They do not understand social boundaries and often repulse the people around them, particularly women, as they are the men who can't take no for an answer. They typically lash out if they get turned down or become vindictive if they don't get their way. If you have Gammas in your organization, your best bet is to isolate them and relegate them to small independent projects. If you are able, you should try to get rid of them as soon as possible. They are toxic to anything productive. Alphas can't stand them because they're always trying to start trouble. Bravos dislike them because they don't follow directions well and are always wanting to do everything their way, and Deltas hate them because they make everyone else uncomfortable while they're just trying to do their job. Your female employees will be creeped out by them and will not want to work with them. The key factor in determining if someone is a Gamma is Gammas always lie and they always project, but most importantly, they're bitter. They're bitter about everything. They're bitter that there are people that are more successful than them, more intelligent than them, and more respected than them. When Gammas are put in charge of anything, they quickly abuse any sort of power they have. They often use it to retaliate against people they felt might have slighted them in the past. A great example of a Gamma from entertainment is Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones or Stan Velchek from The Wire. Finally, there is the Omega, the lowest of the low, the total social reject. Not much is known about them because no one thinks to invite them anywhere, and that's really all I can say about it. But as you consider the hierarchy, remember, it doesn't matter what you think you are or what you want to be, all that matters is how people accept you. Very few people stay at one level in every situation. In fact, your status can change based on who you're around and what you're doing. For example, Stringer Bell in The Wire was alpha in some circumstances, but he also had many Bravo traits which showed why he wasn't successful when he set off on his own. He also had many gamma tendencies with his constant obsession to get back at people that he felt wronged him, regardless of the impact it would have on anyone else. Consider this: you could be a total alpha male in small town America. Maybe you dominated in sports, dated the hottest girls in your school of 400 kids, but then you go to a big college and now you're just another fish in a big pond. Your personality, attitude, and social dynamic are going to change based on those factors. There is a lot of gray area in the hierarchy, and again, this isn't necessarily set in stone. All this does is give some insight into why some people tend to be successful and why others aren't. Remember, being an alpha isn't necessarily a good thing, and being a delta isn't necessarily bad. It just depends on the self-awareness of the individual and how they mitigate their shortcomings. There's also the concept of submission that needs to be addressed. Submission to a more dominant person isn't weakness, nor is it a sign that you are inferior. It simply means deferring to them having the final say on a decision. That's it. It doesn't mean the person who submits is not important, nor does it mean the person with the final say is superior. In short, the submitting person gives way to someone who is better equipped to make a decision based on the current situation. A perfect example of this would be in the documentary The Last Dance that showed an inside look at the Bulls' final championship season in the 90s. In the documentary, it is very obvious that Dennis Rodman is very much an alpha male. However, when it came to the basketball court, he knew it was best for him to follow Jordan's lead. That didn't make him weaker or less. It just showed he knew the hierarchy and how to place himself within it to best serve the team. This is what makes leadership so difficult. It goes way beyond someone wanting to be in charge. Being a leader is accepting total responsibility and being accountable to those who have submitted to your leadership. It isn't to be taken lightly, so it's important to keep this in mind when you hear people saying they want to be in charge or they want to lead. Do they really want to lead, or do they just want the accolades that come with being in a powerful position? As a leader, you need to do everything you can to avoid putting people in a position that will disrupt the effectiveness of the organization. I've been in departments and organizations where a single person was in a position they had no business being in, and it completely destroyed the morale of the entire place. Now, not every situation is that extreme, but your organization's greatest currency and asset is the people in it, so you need to invest in putting them in a position to win. Remember, this dominance hierarchy isn't based on titles or authority. It's based on social interaction. You can use that to your advantage when building teams. Look for people that work well together. If it's an intense project with strict deadlines, you may want to consider putting an alpha in a position who will set a vision and get things done. If it's a long-term project that requires a lot of patience, technical work, and individual contributions rather than group work, you may want to keep that in the hands of your deltas, as putting an alpha in charge may drive them nuts and it may not be good with the technical skills you need. These are just things to consider as you develop people around you. As a leader, you need to be the one to put people in the best position possible. Understanding the dominance hierarchy will give us an insight into different characters and why they act the way they do. By recognizing behaviors in certain individuals, we can also predict how others will respond to them. Consider different characters and think about where they would fall into the hierarchy and if their traits match up to where you think they are. Do characters respond to them the way you predict they would? As I continue to make videos on characters, keep the hierarchy in mind, as I will be using it to analyze their actions. Finally, think of your own social circles, and does the hierarchy help explain some of the social dynamics? One of the most important parts of leadership is understanding people, and this is just another tool you can use to help others develop.